Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of America Grit with myself, Tim Jensen. We have a great program for you today where we will be talking about this year's featured veteran. That's right, my friends. What is the featured veteran? What is Grunt Style's featured veteran? Well, Grunt Style's featured veteran is a campaign initiative to celebrate those veterans whose hard work and spirit show up in their accomplishments and their aspirations. We hope these men and women will serve as an inspiration and as a positive example of what the American warfighter can do when they hang up their uniform and take on the role of a community leader. Join us in this mission as we meet the movers and the shakers of the veteran space. And who is that this week or this year that we'll be talking about? Well, it's our good friend, our veteran fellow at the Grunt Style Foundation. Well, let me read you in, pal. So Derek Blumke is a veteran impact fellow at the Grunt Style Foundation, where he leads the national efforts of reducing veteran suicides through the implementation and safer psychiatric practices of service members, veterans, and all Americans. A 12-year Air Force and Michigan Air National Guard veteran, Derek deployed multiple times to Uzbekistan and Afghanistan between 2001 and 2005. Previously, he has co-founded Student Veterans of America, was a founded committee member at the National Action Alliance for Suicide Prevention, and served as a founding director at the National Mental Program for the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. Derek holds degrees from the University of Michigan and Alma College, and today serves as the chairman of the Psychiatric Safety Subgroup of the Michigan Governor's Challenge and the state legislative director for the Veteran of Foreign Wars Department of Michigan. Man, there's a lot of bona fides, pal.
It's keeping me busy. How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. Well, welcome. Derek, you've been a monstrous force within the foundation. We brought you on about 2 years ago in full capacity, and what you've been really doing is lighting fires within our industry, within our community, up the national levels at the VA and at Congress. Right? You're turning heads. You're forcing people to look at some of the most well, in my opinion, the grotesque medicine applications that I've seen in this country. It's almost barbaric in many instances, and I know that we're going to get into a lot of that. But I wanted to say, man, you're a force to be reckoned with, and the things that we're doing within the Grunt Style Foundation, with you driving these psychotropic conversations, they are definitely hitting the mark.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you. It's honestly an honor to be part of this. When I first came on board 2 years ago, I was coming kind of out of a dark place. And what I found was a team that really cares about fixing the challenges facing our community. And that was something that really resonated with me, because when I first began working on this issue of overprescribing to the veterans community, I was very much alone.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to talk about this. It's still kind of a dirty secret, but unfortunately, for those who didn't want to talk about this, those days are gone.
Yeah.
Because of largely our work. We've been platforming this issue. We're exposing prescription rates at the VA that no one could have even imagined, of having 70% of all veterans under VA care prescribed a psychiatric drug. Prescription rates unheard of anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And we're wondering why we have the suicide rates that we do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's, we're going to frame all that up appropriately, in terms of the size and the scope of this.
Right.
But, I think there's a really important point there that you're mentioning is 10 years ago, 5 years ago, had we started this conversation, and I remember these conversations were kind of happening, but my goodness, the level of ridicule that you would have received if you would have started, being any sort of a skeptic towards, the efficacy of these medicines, these psychotropics in the veteran space, you would have been put out the pasture, man. You would have been laughed off any professional stage. You would have been put in a corner. You would have been laughed at by the APA and all these other doctors that go running around here thinking they're the subject matter experts. But here we are, 2025, and we just had 3 events this year where we brought some significant attention at the congressional level to this topic. Mm-hmm. What is changing? Why do you think the stigma is reducing?
Well, I think what you mentioned there is that I was ridiculed, and I was attacked online by some of my former colleagues within the mental health community, the National Action Alliance on Suicide Prevention that I was a part of. Like, I was gaslit. I was attacked online. I was told that I was going to cause harm. I was going to get people killed. And in fact, I was just exposing what had been going on, which was already getting people killed. And I think we just all deserve better than this.
Yeah.
Like, we served our country, we raised our hand. For many of us, were sent to places where we were either shot at or poisoned or both. And when we came back, I think most Americans would expect that we're taken care of and that we're given every opportunity to succeed in life and every opportunity to have a good income and to be able to take care of our families.
Yeah.
And in spite of that, I think most Americans would be shocked at the type of care that we have gotten, and the prescribing to our population has caused harm that I think is unprecedented in modern times. And
Do you think that the at-large population in America truly understands this being, as big of a problem that it is? And a reason why I asked this question is, if we're seeing these percentages inside the VA, in this cohort, right, which is about 7.1 million, give or take,
6.3 or 4, yep, right? 6.3 or 4, yep.
Inside the VHA,
yep.
We would have to believe that those numbers correspond and extrapolate over into the civilian population. Would that not be would that be appropriate?
They do it in certain groups. So certain age groups of women are prescribed disproportionately than other groups. And so for antidepressants, for example, women that 45 to 64-year-old age group, and it's now becoming the older age groups that are being prescribed super high rates of these medications, 20-25%. Of those age groups prescribed an antidepressant, for example. At VA, this is 2019 data, by the way. We had about 28% or close to 30% of veterans under VA care prescribed an antidepressant. And
to be clear, that 2019 data, right, which we have to put a light on this, right? Because in the realms of the VA, that's relatively new data.
This is infuriating.
Right.
So this data, the VA doesn't disclose this data publicly. The only reason that we have the data that we have, and the reason that we know the prescription rates that we have today, is because there was a FOIA against the VA for the data from 2019. And so they FOIA'd for the number of veterans that VA prescribed an antidepressant and the number of veterans prescribed a psychotropic or psychiatric drug VA-wide. That FOIA came back and showed that 1.75 million veterans under VA care, or veterans who use the VHA, were prescribed an antidepressant, and then 4.2 million were prescribed a psychiatric drug. When they did their press release in 2022, calling attention to this problem of overprescribing, the folks that put those statistics together didn't completely understand the VA population. And so when they put the press release together, they showed it was a 50% and 20% prescription rate, respectively, because they believed that the total number of veterans being treated was 9 million. Yeah. And that's just the number of veterans enrolled. And the problem that we have is that when we put these statistics out showing that 70% and 30% prescription rates, respectively, people were wanting to know where the data came from. And people couldn't believe it. I've had social workers and psychologists from the VA contacting me wanting to know where the data came from and where we had it confirmed. We confirmed this data right before we issued the release on this in June of 2024. And we did so through meetings directly with the chiefs of mental health at VA. And so we had a meeting between myself, the heads of mental health and suicide prevention for the Michigan Veterans Affairs Agency, and I gave them a briefing on this issue and showed these prescription rates and asked, is there anything in here that is inaccurate or unclear? Because we want to make sure that everything we're putting out is exactly accurate. This issue is too important to have wrong. And no comment, no question. Then a few months later, after we did the release in the spring of 24, I helped assist a congressional office to do a request for information from the VA on their data. And though they didn't get the total number of veterans prescribed psychiatric drugs across the board as a whole, they did provide the prescription rates for antidepressants at VA, and it showed exactly what we put together. It's about over the course of a 5-year period, it was between 27.5 and 29% prescription rates of antidepressants to veterans under VA care. So where I have a problem with this is that why in the hell is a spinoff nonprofit of a t-shirt brand, respectively, respectfully, why is it a spinoff of a t-shirt brand putting this type of data out when this should be coming from the VA? Yeah. And there's reasons for this, and we'll get into that in a little bit, I think.
Yeah. No, I think that's an astute observation, right? And the reason why I asked that question is, I think we have to set the table a little bit for our listener, right? Because I don't think that the American population at large generally understands how suicide data is collected at the VA, right? And how these reports are generated and the timeliness of these reports, right? So when I said that 2019 data in the realm of the VA, that's relatively new data, right? Because the suicide prevention reporting that comes out, on an annual basis is 2 years lagging current year.
Correct.
So the data that we're operating off of here in 2025 is coming from a 2-volumed report that came out from 2023's data and the aggregate of that.
Right.
Right. So when I say the 2019 data of these FOIA requests of overprescribing or the prescription rates inside the VA, that still would be considered good data in consideration of how data is collected for suicide prevention inside the VA, correct?
Correct. And what I find concerning is that though this is relatively quote unquote new data, the prescription rates the VA has, they have this data.
Yeah.
They have this at hand. They have to. Like if they have to pay for these drugs, like there's contracts with the pharmaceutical companies and distributors for these drugs. So if you're saying that you don't know how many pills you put out, you're a liar, right? Because you paid for them.
Correct.
How else? Like, if you don't know, who's in charge and overseeing these people to ensure that something so important is not tracked and is not publicly disclosed, because this is something that the entire veterans community deserves to hear and know.
Yeah.
And so I think where we're at is just like, we need to have an overhaul in the way we do things, but also open kimono on all the VA's data. And this is something we've been calling for years.
Yes.
Retrain prescribers on side effects and issues related to psychotropics, written informed consent, because right now we've had multiple OIG investigations finding the VA is not providing informed consent to veterans. In a couple health systems, they found that most veterans' health records did not reflect informed consent. And in the case of Hunter Whitley, a Marine Corps veteran who was a student at the University of Alabama and a former Marine that got blown up at Abbey Gate, he was prescribed a couple medications, and the provider herself admitted to the OIG that she did not discuss the box warning for suicide risk with this young man who was 22 years old when he died.
Yeah, it's criminal.
It is, because
from a practitioner level,
right?
That's criminal. That person should be put in jail.
Yeah, well, I think it's a combination of things. I think it's not just the individual prescribers, as I used to just think that everybody's a monster. All the doctors are monsters. And I really had to pause and realize, you know what? People spend 12, 15 years of their lives going to medical school to do this training. And like, they don't go into this because they want to hurt somebody.
Sure.
Like, imagine being that person, been prescribing these drugs for 10 years, and just now finally really understanding the risk profiles of these medications that they weren't trained on in medical school, and knowing and thinking about the patients that never came back to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I also think about like, you get roughly about 3 minutes with your provider,
right?
Real good quality conversation in your 30-minute block,
maybe,
right? And
not just VA, but anywhere,
any primary care,
anywhere,
right?
Yep.
And within that really good 3 minutes of time that you're communicating your position to your primary care provider, they're thinking about their next patient. They're thinking about what they didn't put in the medical paper for the last patient they saw, and they just heard you talk about your problem, and they're going to give you a script for whatever that is, and they're going to send you on your happy way. Because coincidentally, that thing that they heard you say was also something what triggered your mind on why you made that purchase from the pharmaceutical salesperson that came into your office and said, hey, we've got this great drug, trazodone, that's going to be able to do this for your patients, and said the exact same thing that triggered you to remember, hey, I've got a tool for that, and I'm going to give you a prescription for that. So that's problem number one. The second problem I have with a lot of this, is specifically with the VA reporting structures, is, this year we got a 2-volume report, right? Went in great detail on a lot of things that just were not of any substance, right? Again, we learned that 73% of veterans are likely to take their life by a pistol. And the overarching, solution in that 2-volume suicide prevention report this year was to make sure we lock up our guns. The thing that is not in that 2-volume report that we were just talking about is, I don't know, what's the average dose size of a psychotropic that we're putting out to these individuals? What's the average length of time that an individual is on these medicines?
Key, absolutely key. And that's something that we're not talking about. And when that report came out, we talked immediately after it came out. And when it first came out, I've done this every year since I began working on this issue back in 2018, is every year an annual suicide report comes out. And I've gone through all of them since I think it's 2012, where the first one was published by the VA, and this is required by Congress. And I do keyword searches through the PDF, searching for antidepressant, antipsychotic, stimulant, sedative, psychotropic, psychiatric drug. Up until this 2024 report, there's never been a single mention of psychiatric medications, or any medications for that matter, and the role of veteran suicides.
Correct.
And when that report came out, I was just so upset because I couldn't even read the thing for another week and a half. I was so upset I couldn't even look at it, because in the fall of 23, I had a meeting with the VA's head of suicide prevention, or former head of suicide prevention, Matt Miller. We met at this place called Granny's Diner in the middle of a farm field in Michigan. He happens to live in Michigan, and I live in Lansing, just outside of the state capital. And so we met at this diner, and he shared his concern with me, a concern of trazodone. And when I asked him how he wanted to consider this meeting, because a lot of people that talk with me from the VA, they don't want to be publicly disclosed because there's a culture of retribution that's gone on in there forever. Yeah. And so Matt knew about this issue, and he flagged that concern of trazodone with me, because we had about 364,000 vets prescribed trazodone for sleep. And the VA did a study showing there's a 61% higher suicide rate for those prescribed trazodone than Ambien, for example.
And Ambien is the commercial patented version.
For Zolpidem, yep.
Right.
And which is not the safest drug on earth either.
No. So I think, just to, again, shine a little light on this for a moment, right? Is that, in all things government, right, it is cost prohibitive in the way that it looks at everything that it does. So it has chosen, and it's still in this practice today, to continue to provide a pill in the form of trazodone that has a 61% higher suicidal ideation rate than its commercial patented counterpart called Ambien. Yet we choose not to use the better viable solution.
There's a lot of reasons for it. But I think the larger thing that we need to be talking about, and like you mentioned, is the first thing that we do is prescribe a pill. And the reason for this is the VA and DOD's clinical practice guidelines. First line of defense when someone is diagnosed with depression is prescribing an antidepressant.
100%. I have a staff member that's behind the camera right now that came to me one time, most recently, and said, Tim, is it strange that I went to the VA because I was having some anxiety over an acute moment in time, and they wanted me to go and get a prescription of Klonopin? Is that normal? Absolutely not. It's not normal. But this is the practice.
Well, I would argue that there is a place for medications. I would.
Certainly.
And so the anxiety, I'd actually argue that if somebody's having acute panic attacks, benzodiazepines can be very useful for very short periods of time. And we've known the risks of these medications going back to the 60s and 70s when there was an epidemic of these drugs targeted to white women, calling it mommy's little help, mother's little helper is what we marketed these drugs as. And there is a place for them, but what we've done is for decades place people on these drugs for long-term use, which these drugs should never be prescribed for more than 2 weeks at a time. And the doctors should be the first ones to say that. In most cases they are, but we're still finding cases where people are parked on one of these drug classes for a decade or two.
Yes.
And when you try to get off of a benzodiazepine, Xanax or Valium, for example, it can be the most horrific experience of your life. Cockroaches crawling underneath your skin, bolts of lightning hitting you in the head. My friend Angie and others described, over the course of a week, I had 3 different people tell me that their withdrawal experience from a benzodiazepine had them wanting to stab themselves in the stomach. That's not a natural thought.
Yeah.
And nor is a lot of these acts of violence that we see. Yeah. But I do want to go back to the suicide report. Yeah. Because in 2024, so I met with Dr. Miller in fall of 23. Throughout all of 24, we had an hour-long briefing where we briefed the former VA Secretary McDonough on this issue, met with former Undersecretary Elmahal, briefed him on this issue. He sent an email to his chief medical officer and his chiefs of mental health raising concerns about possible inappropriate prescribing and adverse outcomes for veterans at VA because of our current prescribing practices. It's not verbatim, it's pretty darn close. And so this issue is flagged up and down the chain of command at VA Mental Health and the VA nationally, and miraculously in the 24 report, there was not a single mention, with the exception of sedative use disorder. When I met with Mr. Miller not long ago at the MCON conference, I asked him about this. Who made the decision not to include psychiatric medications, enroll these medications and suicides in the annual report? And he said, no one made that decision. Which means, as the chief of suicide prevention, that falls on you.
The buck stops there, man.
Exactly. And then second part is...
What's his name?
Dr. Matt Miller.
Matt Miller.
Yep. And so we then have... the exclusion of any mention in the role of these medications in suicide, but for the first time and only ever mention of a psychiatric drug was the term benzodiazepine, and it was related to sedative use disorder, what they called. And showed that
buried in the appendixes.
Yeah, but like this report, it trumped up this 29% higher suicide attempt rate for those on prescribed that have sedative use disorder. Well, what is sedative use disorder? It's benzodiazepines primarily. And when I asked Dr. Miller about this, he corrected me and said, well, and trazodone. It's the same drug he mentioned to me 2 years ago.
Yeah, previously.
And instead of talking about this, a class of drugs that you primarily can only get this type of disorder from being prescribed them. Yes, you can get them off the street, but it's most commonly from inappropriate prescribing. And instead, we basically got labeled with another damn addiction thing that's our fault.
Yeah.
Rather than talking about inappropriate prescribing of these medications. And it is just crushing because we all deserve better than this. And this revolving door that we see at VA and DOD as well, but for our purposes for VA mental health, we see chiefs of mental health and suicide prevention at VA leaving VA and going to work for companies that I don't know for sure, but we're likely managing the contract and going to the contractors that they happen to be managing while leading suicide prevention at VA. And so
well, a lot of these people enrich themselves, right, in the private industry after they have been exposed to all the government data.
It's that, but also like there's laws prohibiting SES, senior executive service employees, from going to work for contractors that were related to the projects they were working on or managing.
Yeah.
And there's exemptions for that, sure, but
we saw this exactly on the Prozac conference, right? Where you had a bunch of people that were wearing double hats. So correct. I mean, this is not new. It's more of the same. It looks like
it is. Right? It is, and the same thing goes with the APA and the VA's mental health leadership.
And whatever unholy relationship they have with big pharma, right? And you can go. That's a whole other rabbit hole.
You can track the dollars,
right? You can track the dollars. You can
see the money flow from the drug companies to the APA, and then you can see these overlapping relationships between the folks running VA mental health nationally, where they're all current or former senior leaders at the state or national level of the APA.
Yeah. So would it be?
It's hard just not to get so pissed off.
It
about
is.
This.
It really is.
It's impossible to not get pissed.
So, would it be fair to say that the Office of Mental Health inside the VHA is actively working against all the people they're trying to help?
I would argue that there is a cult, call it, and that is the APA.
Yeah.
And I spoke about this at a couple conferences recently that I was on a stage last week with one of the heads of whole health at VA.
Yeah.
And I was asked, what do we need to do moving forward? And I said, who is an Air Force maintainer, aircraft maintainer in the room that understands the term R square? And a couple hands went up. And I said, what we need to do is place Grace, who's whole health at VA, place Grace in charge of VA mental health, and replace the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, from running VA's mental health.
Yes.
Because these are folks who went to medical school solely focused on psychiatric drug prescribing. That's what they do.
Yeah, they're not doctors.
They don't. Yeah, they are doctors.
Yeah, they're not.
They don't.
You could say that. I will not say that.
I will. And here's what I will say is that I call the other doctors the real doctors.
Yeah.
Is what I'll say. They went to medical school, but a lot of what they learned in medical school is inaccurate related to this issue. Like, there's doctors coming out of medical school today that are not being trained on antidepressant withdrawal at all, not even aware of it. They're still telling people to just, like, you've been on an antidepressant for 5 years, 10 years, just, hey, cut your pills in half for 2 weeks and then cut them in half for another 2 weeks. And you can stop.
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing.
I did that, and I had bolts of lightning hitting me in the head, cockroaches crawling into my skin, and thinking the drug industry had a hit in my life.
Yeah.
They didn't then, but
some of the data that we're seeing coming out from some of these big research colleges, right, is really illuminating the fact that, a lot of these psychotropics, let's say of the SSRI variety,
Sure.
right, are actually not doing what they are intended to do, or even in the realm of
Right.
Proximity.
Right. I mean, this goes back to how these drugs are approved. Like, most people, if people really understood the history of how, say, the SSRI class of medications was approved, it would cause them significant concern and alarm.
Yeah.
Because when they got Prozac through the FDA in 1988 and then Zoloft through 1990, what people don't know is that these trials are only 6 weeks in length total. They only need to submit 2 trials to the FDA. And when these committees convened at the FDA reviewing these drugs for approval, in spite of almost all of them having active financial conflicts of interest at the time, which we only would later learn, in spite of that, their entire debate during these panels was efficacy, to the point where in the Prozac approval process, the regulator from the FDA had to step in and tell the panelists that it is not your job to deny; it's only to approve. You can find any level of benefit over a placebo.
Yeah,
and the drug companies could have done 20 different studies and just happened to found 2 that happened to show some level of efficacy, and that is a problem because when we're prescribed these drugs, we're told they're life-saving. And for some, they help a great deal. And that's not to diminish that. And this is not an attack on those who take these medications, because for many people, they feel like it helps them.
Yeah.
I would never argue for taking any medication from someone who believes it's helping them.
Sure, yeah.
But the problem we have is that when we were told a story and later learned that story is false, we need to go back and review everything that we're doing, because just like modern science, the studies that are done today are based on previous studies. And so if the bottom of that pyramid is broken,
yeah,
the whole thing can
fruit of the
down,
poisonous
and that's
tree.
what we've found. That's exactly what we found with 18 to 34-year-old veteran suicide rates looking like the hockey stick growth of Facebook in its early years. And they deserve better than that, but our country does, because this is not just veterans. This is all Americans.
Yeah.
This is impacting families.
Yeah, the veterans are just the canary in the coal mine.
We're the canary again, and we deserve better than this.
And Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that was the water, the rabbit hole I was alluding to earlier. It's like, again, we find ourselves in the the crosshairs of emerging sciences, right, where the veterans are constantly being tested on. Why? Because there's now laws that you can't test on federal inmates, but there is no laws that you can't test on veterans at the VHA.
This goes back to 1946 when this issue we're talking about, the APA's role in VA mental health, this goes back to the VA mental health, the inception of mental health at VA. 1946 is when the first large-scale VA mental health program began, and it was the former president and chief medical officer of the APA who went there to build it. And it was during that time we started experimenting with antipsychotics on veterans.
Lobotomies.
50s, we did, I think, over 2,500 lobotomies on veterans at the VA. Yes, and the person that invented that procedure and practice, I believe, was awarded a Nobel Prize for this.
Right.
It was later revoked, but like, why are we doing these experiments on people? And why are we continuing to do them? Where you fast forward to the 80s, where actually the chair of that committee that recommended the approval of Zoloft and Prozac, that individual had been working at the VA as a psychiatrist, and had been doing studies on veterans with antipsychotics, and yanking vets off of their antipsychotics abruptly to see how quickly their symptoms would recur.
I'm looking at a couple of these names that are currently running the VA mental health program, and they don't seem any different than Mengele. Right? In terms of I consider these people just testing on humans.
I believe
that's a bold statement. I get it.
I believe, no, I have a difficult time. Let's speak plainly here. And we've talked about this. And I can't thank you and the team's support recently. But I was diagnosed with a brain tumor recently. And 2 years ago, I asked for brain scans. And the reason I asked for brain scans is because that I was deployed to a base in southern Uzbekistan, just north of Afghanistan in 2001, right after the war began, where we'd later learn, and I was deployed again in a second time in 2003, we later learned that 2 tactical nukes were detonated there, or exploded there in 1991, where we were from that exposed to yellow cake uranium and chemical weapons, because the base is also a chemical weapons depot for the Soviets for 20 years. And I asked my doctor, I'd like to have scans done because I know the cancer rates. I know the rates of tumors and other issues. I'm concerned. And instead of listening to me, I got a lecture about these tests are expensive. We can't do them for everybody. And so fast forward to July 30th of this year, my wife and I, who got married just a year and a half ago, had our first child, a daughter. 6 days later, I had an MRI. And 6 days after that, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. I got a phone call. And initially, I didn't fully understand it. Unfortunately, now I do, because my symptoms have been ramping up. And imbalance.
You're a pill seeker, Derek. You're a pill seeker.
It's just tragic. It's just tragic.
Yeah.
Because I'm now having to look at the path forward from here, and going through airports and going to conferences and going into large rooms makes me nauseous and sick. And never mind my ear ringing all the time now where this tumor is. But meeting with a surgeon, it's in a place where you can get at it, but it's in a tight spot. And in order to get it out, you have to retract part of the brain to access it. And there's no confidence that everything's going to go perfectly. A lot of people have procedures to get these things removed, but they call this thing the lucky brain tumor. Mine happens to be in an unlucky location. And where my tune has changed more recently is that I don't know how much time I've got with good health. I don't think it's going to kill me, but there's a chance that I'm not able to do this anymore. Just traveling, it's horrible now. Something I really used to love.
Yeah.
And so it's increased my timeline. And I think it's increased the timeline for many of us that care about this and care about me, because they know I've stopped my life for this for the past 7 years. And I've been working on mental health for vets off and on for the past near 20. And this is the lowest hanging fruit, simplest thing that we can correct. And instead of treating our folks who've got brain injuries from IEDs or training incidents, or the folks that are exposed to chemical weapons or radiation or other toxins overseas, the reason radiation is not an option for my treatment, because the doctor doesn't want to supercharge the tumor because he believes it was caused by my deployments to Uzbekistan. And so instead of looking for the root causes and treating vets with HBOTs for brain injuries, for example, we're loosely throwing diagnoses around and throwing pills at people, masking the symptoms for years, when in many cases we could have saved so many lives and properly given the folks the treatment they deserved. That includes myself. Like, I met a neurologist at a conference just last week, and we were talking. I quickly realized that he would understand the problem that I have. And I told him the type of tumor it was, and he could have asked about dizziness, nausea, a litany of things. The one thing that he asked was, do you have issues with overwhelm? When I first came down here and did our first podcast together, I was a wreck.
Yeah.
And this has been something that's plaguing me for years. And had we been looking for this, I get it's rare, but TBIs aren't. We could have been, it'd have been a whole different story for the past 5 years or a couple of years since we learned about K2, done the right scans, done the right screens, and not just screening, oh, you have depression. First line of defense is an antidepressant. And I say this because we don't have all the time in the world, and every day that goes by that we don't address this problem is another day that another family loses a loved one. And I can't bear that anymore.
Yeah. Well, I feel you, man. I think you, myself, many people in this room, we've buried more people to suicide than we have actually lost in combat. And I don't think that's anything to be proud about.
No.
I think that's shameful, right? And it's all preventative. Like, we could prevent all of this. So I want to go back to, talking about the APA and some of the people that are, at the top of the VA mental health. There are 3 doctors there. One of them
is dearly departed from the VA.
Yeah, is somebody that you have some umbrage with.
Yeah. Well, what most people don't know is that folks running the VA, quote unquote, mental health, that's psychiatry. And there's like a hierarchy within medicine. And if you're a doctor, you're at the top of that food chain. And within mental health, that is the case. And so the current chief of mental health is the former president of the American Psychiatric Association for Ohio. She remains an advisor to the APA Ohio. Dr. Marsden McGuire, who is the recently was the head of Continuum Care Mental Health at VA. He actually attended 2 of our conferences. In one case, he shared with me the jury is still out as to whether antidepressants cause suicide at the macro level, but at the individual level, you can certainly say that. I don't understand how that logic stacks, but he attended 2 of our conferences. To my knowledge, there's been no action from VA, regardless of his hearing these stories from these families and the veterans who survived these harrowing trials and tribulations to get through it.
Well, I think the VA right now is not in any sense of being serious, right? They're running around with influencers talking about like all the things that they're fixing that have absolutely no impact on suicide prevention, suicide reduction.
I haven't seen it yet. I just haven't seen it.
0, period.
I haven't seen it. And then the thing that I think is for me is most upsetting, and when I first discovered this, I just felt betrayed. Dr. Ilse Vickers, who testifies regularly to Congress, we'd been meeting with her for almost 2 years, a year and a half, myself and mental health leaders from the State Veterans Agency in Michigan. So government employees. I frankly, we had some issues where the VA had actually banned their psychologists and clinicians from attending our governor challenge meetings on this issue of overprescribing and drug safety. And ultimately they did send somebody. It was their head of psychiatric drug safety. But we met with Dr. Vickers. I lost track of the number of times. And an offline conversation, she told me that off-label prescribing pisses me off. That's what she told me. But about 2 months ago, I came across a book called A Psychiatrist's Guide to Advocacy. She is the lead editor alongside 3 others. The former chief executive officer of the American Psychiatric Association, former head of federal relations and advocacy at the American Psychiatric Association, another psychiatrist at the United Health University, Defense Health University, and herself. And at that time, she was leading, I believe, the psychiatric drug safety initiative for VA that she actually helped create. And when I found this book and I started going through it, it teaches motivational interviewing, like basically how to manipulate people. It teaches psychiatrists how to put themselves in positions at the state and federal government, and how to influence and help support good policies and laws and block bad policies and laws.
Would you say that these are tactics that probably have been perfected inside the VA?
I want to take half of this book and train our troops. It has some really good meat in there, and it really does. But unfortunately, the focus throughout this book is on like pay parity, making sure psychiatrists are getting paid the same amount as what we said earlier, the other real doctors.
Yeah.
Like this has been their focus. Former head of psych.
These are quacks, people. These are quacks.
I believe there are many great ones out there. There's a couple I'm aware of that are helping, that have set their lives' mission on safely deprescribing patients from these medications, and those who are having adverse drug events, helping to care for them. Many cases, though, the training they received was just bad, and that training was influenced by the APA, the DSM, basically the psychiatry's Bible, is exactly that for this field. If you have this issue, the symptom, you have this diagnosis, period, and that's it in a box.
Yeah. Here's 15 prescriptions that will help you with that.
Yep. And where this is even more problematic, I think, for us, is that they've been, I no longer see the VA mental health leadership and APA as being separate, because for years, both of these groups have been blocking bills that would make prescribing practices safer at the VA. In 2010, there was House Veterans Affairs Committee hearings where the American Psychiatric Association and the VA both testified, saying everything's fine, nothing to see here. All of our drugs are safe. Don't worry about us. Yeah. A quote from Dr. Anel Prim from the APA at that time: while we acknowledge the concerns expressed regarding the use of psychiatric medications, particularly antidepressants, and their alleged links to suicide rates among veterans, we urge caution against hasty legislative actions that might limit access to these vital treatments. She goes on, but there's no hasty action here, and no one's calling for just stopping prescribing. But what we're calling for is safer prescribing practices, more information for patients, retraining of doctors. 2016, there was a bill markup. Congresswoman Brownlee of California, she wrote a bill that would have required written consent VA-wide at that time. They held a hearing on it. 3 groups testified: the American Psychiatric Association, the VA, and NAMI. And NAMI, for years, received, I think, $60 to $80 million in donations from the drug companies. Right. And so all 3 groups opposed. 2021, APA and HVAC. Again, the American Psychiatric Association involved themselves and killed legislation on written consent. 23, a bill markup where the internal bill markup, another bill had been drafted, and again, internal VA killed it. And one of their claims was that if the patients knew all the risks of the medications that are being prescribed, they might not want to take them. That's informed consent.
Yes,
that's what we.
That's exactly
that's by law.
Right.
That is federal law that patients should be informed of the risks of their treatments. And then in 2025, now I'm learning that Dr. Vickers and other VA mental health leaders have been engaging with members of Congress and their staffs, killing this legislation introduced in the House that would end this, would make prescribing practices safer. And it's difficult to convey the betrayal that we wasted our time for a year and a half meeting with these people, and all along we were getting gaslit and I feel like lied to. And our nation deserves better, and certainly our nation's veterans deserve better than this.
Yeah. Man. I think
I know.
it's criminal, man. It like when I think of I think it was you that brought this to my attention. Didn't they combine the Office of Mental Health and the Office of Suicide Prevention?
They'd always been under one, and they split them. And the belief was
they had it backwards.
Yep. And they believed we were going to separate the Office of Suicide Prevention. And what I actually believe they really did is they took the psychiatrists out of the limelight. They took the chiefs of mental health out of the limelight. They put psychologists out front and center of the firing range in front of Congress, where they had to do this spin about more outreach and more contact and more screening, when in fact, I believe it's largely the over-screening that we do of our vets that's causing these things, because the first line of defense, again, is medications. But what we didn't know, and the opioid epidemic and this epidemic are very similar.
It's the same.
It is. And the difference is that the opiates will just make your heart stop beating and your lungs stop pumping oxygen. With these drugs, it makes you, in many cases, possibly hurt yourself, possibly hurt others.
Impotent.
For some, PSSD or persistent sexual dysfunction after stopping an SSRI, we believe that was just while on the medication. For some people, this is permanent. Issues of pregnancy and fetal development for mothers who are on SSRIs. But I used to think it was just the APA, and I used to think it was just the drug companies, but there's other companies involved. McKinsey was, in one hand, consulting Purdue Pharma, the Sackler family on how to push more opiates. And in the other case, they were consulting with the VA, their other client. And they had unprecedented access to the VA's data, to their leadership. And on the other hand, they're literally advising, this is just so upsetting, literally advising the drug companies to target VA health systems nationwide and to identify a target list of decision makers at VA who could possibly get contracts to continue pushing this epidemic and these drugs down the veterans' throats.
Yeah. No, we learned this from
unconscionable.
Yeah, we learned this from Larry Miller.
Yes.
Right? And he was inside the system for a long time. He was a ER doctor in the VA for a period of time. You guys can listen to his podcast, where he basically, comes out and says that I was a man that was involved in pushing this stuff, and I am ashamed of it. Yeah. Right. And knowing the impacts that it has today.
How that hurts him.
Yes. And now his son is dead because his son took his life in the parking lot of Audie Murphy.
Yep.
And I think the most enraging part of it all is, and it should rage every single one of you that is listening, is that the VA right now, today, old Doug Collins can, with a stroke of his own pen, I'll send you a pen if you need it, pal, you can implement informed signatory consent right now.
Without Congress doing it.
He doesn't need Congress.
Without Congress compelling you to do so.
Right.
I'd go a step further. My ask would be to President Trump and to Secretary Collins is to extricate the APA from VA mental health leadership. They need to be out. We need to no longer have these doctors running the show. They've proven to ourselves over and over again they do not belong to be in charge and cannot treat our veterans with the care and safety and respect that they deserve.
Yes, I'll echo that.
Suicide rates, the hockey stick growth of the 18 to 34-year-old veterans is inexplicable. And the only way you can explain it is that we have increased our screenings, increased the prescribing of these drugs, and we've been failing to tell these veterans about the risks of these drugs. Again, Hunter Whitley prescribed an antidepressant, killed himself a month and a half later. VA OIG does an investigation and finds the provider themselves even admitted that they did not provide informed consent. Multiple health system OIG inspections, investigations. Most veterans' health records not reflecting informed consent discussions. Connor Brumfield prescribed Wellbutrin which is contraindicated with anybody with a TBI, 8 pills and 8 days later, he killed himself. Both of these young men were within that box warning. They're both 22 years old and they're gone. And their families deserve better. Our country deserves better. These kids could have been future leaders of our nation. And right now we're allowing this epidemic to continue because we're continuing to allow the same people that are running mental health for our country and for our veterans since 1946 to continue to do what they've been doing.
Yeah. Well,
we can do better.
And I think it's important, again, to just reframe the VHA in itself, right? The Veterans Administration became a cabinet-level department in the 80s.
Correct.
Why? Because of all the death and malpractice and all the things that were coming through the VA at that time, right? Killing World War II Korean veterans, mistreating Vietnam veterans.
A horror show where those troops from Vietnam came back into the health system, and my uncle lost his leg in Vietnam. Was the first time he described getting spit on was going through the VA.
Right.
In Colorado, and then having my grandmother breaking him out because it was so bad.
Right.
Out of the Ann Arbor VA.
So
at that time,
we get this cabinet level department now, and what have we got? We have got worse treatment. We've got probably more. I think if anybody's out there that's retired that has time on their hands, do this research. Are there more deaths today in the cabinet level of the Department of VA than there were prior to them being at cabinet level? I would say just by volume, it's probably more deaths today. And due to the level of medicine and ways that they can figure out how to kill a veteran, it's higher. That's anecdotal, I don't know. But nonetheless.
Certainly for mental health treatment.
Right.
I've jokingly said before, it might be safer to throw a bottle of Jack and a shotgun at somebody than it is to just throw meds at them without telling them the risks.
Look at like Suboxone, right? I talk about Suboxone a lot because it's the most proliferated drug in America right now for opioid addictions, right? And to get people off it. Well, to understand really how Suboxone came into the United States of America, you have to understand how big pharma took control of the opioids and started proliferating the stuff inside the country. To now where, had it not been for, this company's relationship with the VA and their testing of Suboxone inside the veterans cohort, they wouldn't have a product as viable as it is today.
Looking back again, antipsychotics in the 50s doing the same thing. Tests. We've been a science experiment for far too long.
Right.
In
the nation's most treasured individuals.
Our nation's most treasured science experiments.
Besides the children, of course, right? The children are number one. But I'd say behind the children, our most treasured assets, the veterans that defended this country, are being treated like test subjects under a Nazi type of medical rule. a bit much, I get it, but I'm trying to make a point.
There are things that you say that I don't say.
Sure.
But I would want to add in all of this is that the VA does a lot of wonderful work, and they help a ton of veterans. And there's a lot of amazing, incredible people that sacrifice their lives every day that aren't... Just like the veterans, they aren't getting the support and the training that they deserve because every day they have to go into a system that is overburdened, that is not doing the right things when it comes to mental health, that they want to talk about this, but they're afraid of talking about it for getting in trouble.
Yeah.
And
if we had any other...
Our mental health counselors and the VA employees deserve better than what policies we have in place right now.
I would tell you this. If United Healthcare had a suicide problem where a lot of their members were taking their lives, the United States government would probably come and say, hey guys, you got a problem. We should probably do something about this.
I would argue that there's a certain individual in a certain federal department right now that's probably looking into such things. And I would say his last name
Deeply
might
encouraged.
Rhyme with entity,
right?
And start with it's Kennedy. That's
deeply encouraged that he is pursuing psychotropics and a litany of other things that are just making the American unhealthy.
Yep.
But But look at the vitriol this man is having to go through because Big Pharma is trying to take him down to the knees.
Yep. Well, I'd actually argue that he has a huge problem in HHS with entrenchment of many of these folks, psychiatrists, primarily the APA, their tentacles and everything. The VA's got a bigger problem, I'd argue, because by the numbers, the VA employs more psychiatrists, I think, than any group in the country. And what that results in is not just federal influence, but holding president roles at the state levels.
Yeah.
I've seen an example where president of the APA, who is a psychiatrist at the VA, and the president of the AMA, who also is another psychiatrist at the VA in the same state, introduced a resolution internally within the APA calling for pay parity at VA, which means, again, pay us as much as the real doctors. Yeah. And this went through their entire federal regulation team, went to the CEO. It looked like their head of government relations and the president of the APA went to go meet with the former VA Secretary, Bob McDonald. If you're an employee of an organization, how would you feel if one of your employees said, you know what, I don't believe in this policy, this HR policy. I believe I should have 5 days off a week, for example. And instead of coming to the leadership of the organization, instead goes out to a trade group and has that trade group then come to you and have a meeting with you trying to make reforms to the way you do business. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what's happening here. Yeah. And so when we're talking about this problem, it is a spider web that needs to get wrangled under control. It needs to get wrangled quickly.
And it's doing it under the guise of, well, we're medical professionals.
Sure.
We know.
Don't question us.
The DSM-5.
Derek is not allowed to talk about this because he does not have an MD.
Right. Exactly.
False. Guess what?
Exactly.
Let's go toe to toe.
Because if all I need to do is read a DSM-5 to make a determination on somebody, you don't need a certificate.
I can be a robot. We got ChatGPT for that now.
Exactly.
What do we need that for?
Right.
Like
the APA.
Oh, here's the diagnosis. Oh, you have
These
this.
are
You
real
feel this
doctors.
way. You feel this way. Yeah. So, yeah.
That's like saying, and this might be a little bit much, but I'm going to say it anyways. It's like saying that an anesthesiologist is not a pain medicine doctor.
Let's talk about the path forward. We've got hearings coming up in the U.S. Senate. Bills are being introduced left and right around this issue right now. We've got a lot of action coming out of HHS around this. Unfortunately, there's been politicization of this, and I also believe it's because many folks from VA mental health are going over and meeting with folks on Capitol Hill.
The revolving door.
And what's happening is that them and the APA are advising HVAC and SVAC Dems on this issue, saying this is a bad bill, written consent is a bad bill, everything's fine. We already have policies and procedures in place. All that's already working. Don't ignore the OIG investigations. They've been engaging folks in SVAC and HVAC, majority and minority, but what we've been seeing is basically a line being drawn in the sand. And when members of Congress on the Dem side go to reach out to their committee staff and House and Senate Veterans Affairs committees, they're being advised not to support the legislation. Yeah. And their counsel is coming from the APA and VA. And again, same thing. I don't see it any different anymore. And so what that translates to is politicization of an issue that should be the most bipartisan thing on earth. Yeah. That we have the OIG investigations. We've got studies showing doubling of suicide attempts and risks of these medications. We've got the prescription rates that are unprecedented anywhere in the world. 70% of all vets of the VA on one of these medications. We deserve better than having folks that are working for our government going out and politicizing an issue that should be the most bipartisan thing on earth. And so what I'd ask is that we start to see reform at VA related to the overprescribing epidemic, and that we start to see folks on both sides of the aisle just coming together on this one issue. Keep fighting about everything else. I prefer that we didn't, but I don't care. This is the one issue that I care about. Let's fix this and let's be a team on this one, because the enemy is not the Democrat, it's not the Republican. The enemy here is a corrupt drug industry that has been influencing our nation's health for nearly a century. Yeah. And why are we continuing to allow this? Yeah. So,
well, it's at the end of the day, it's profiteering.
It is.
and at the expense of the American that's just willing to or wanting to have a better life for themselves, right? I think, we have some legislation, on the floor right now, right, in the House of Representatives, through Representative Bergman, Billerickis, and self, specifically around informed signatory consent. Our good friend John Spagnola has worked on this. Many good people have worked hard drafting this, putting it together, getting co-signers on board for this. We've been involved to a reasonable degree.
Significant degree.
What do you think? What do you think the end result's going to be?
I think that a good chunk of this is going to come down from HHS, but I don't think it's right that the parties fight and quarrel about this when they should be working together.
No.
I don't think this is this nonsense of conspiracy theorist crap. Like, well, you don't need it. It doesn't take a PhD to go through and do some quick searches, and you can find the studies, you can find the data, you can find the DOJ investigations, translating all of what's going on.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I think is very important here to really examine, right? To your point, this should be a non-party issue, right? Because it affects every constituent, left, right, center, doesn't matter. And what we've seen over the years is that there are very few bills that get overwhelming bipartisan support. And if you look back over the years, what have those bills generally been around military-related stuff, right? Burn pits, right? We saw overwhelming support up until the point where they had some squabbling between the parties, and 14 people schismed off of that, and we had to go do the thing. But up until that point, it was overwhelming support. Do you think that the lack of support around some of these issues is due to the entrenchment and the PACs that are receiving benefits from big pharma money?
Entirely. I mean, we've talked about. I think we've talked about the cult culture within the APA. We didn't talk about the disproportionate funding going from the APA PAC to Democratic candidates. Over the course of the past 15 years, APA PAC has disproportionately funded Democratic campaigns. For the past 5 years, every year for the past 5 years, they've disproportionately funded Democratic campaigns over Republican campaigns. And again, what I believe is happening is that it's a deliberate effort.
Yeah.
Because I think many conservatives today, largely due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and the vaccine being forced upon everyone that had not been properly studied for safety or efficacy, for that matter, but safety. I believe that conservatives generally are more of like, hey, are you sure that's safe?
Right.
And we've got this schism where folks on the left can be more of don't question the science.
Yeah. Well, I find a lot of it coming from the representatives that are elected individuals as unscientific, right? Because, and crazily enough, a lot of the people that are in, the House of Representatives that are opposing informed consent, signatory consent, make up, of doctors, and medical people.
Historically, that's been our problem, the MDs in Congress, actually.
So earlier this year, 20 representatives came out, if you remember, and said that we highly disagree with psychotropics, the findings of psychotropics as being a form of possible contributions to veteran suicide, something to that effect. And I remember you and I having this conversation. We nearly fell out of our chairs.
Yep.
Right. And then I was like, dude, we gotta write a response.
How it's possible. Yeah. What the hell are they even talking about?
Right.
Anybody who argues against this right now, like they're in some hot water, frankly, because their arguments are so indefensible. Patients might not want to take their medications if they know of all the risks. That is informed consent. Doctors won't have enough time to spend with their patients if we force them to do this additional step.
Right.
Well, if you're going to prescribe a medication and cause someone to put a pistol in their mouths, I think we should spend a little extra time making sure they understand the risks of that.
Absolutely. And
alcohol interaction.
Another part of what, the opposing side, not the opposing, but the detractors.
There is an opposing side. It's this.
Yeah. The people that are standing on the fence for the APA and these slingers, they like to say, don't question the science. Don't question the science. Don't question the science. Emerging science. No. Scientific method. Absolutely not. We don't. Scientific method is no longer valid because the science is already determined. But isn't the scientific method
about asking questions?
About asking questions to prove that the evidence is incorrect?
It sure is.
Like, that is what I don't understand. That's what makes this whole conversation moot. That makes every one of you people on the other side of this that is arguing on behalf of the pharmaceutical companies and sciences that are coming up wrong. Period.
Yep.
And I went to high schowe.
Well said. Well, very well said. Yes, very well said. And what we... if we want to talk about the science, just have them publish all the pharmaceutical companies' data and all the studies that they didn't publish.
Right.
That's science. Show your data.
Right.
And that's what I
let it be peer reviewed. Let's stand up on its own two legs.
Well, let's stop ghostwriting studies.
Yeah.
Like the GSK study on Paxil for kids. This is one of the most infamous studies that's ever been done. That they did this study on kids and they had the thing ghostwritten by a marketing firm who never even saw the raw trial data, claimed the drug was safe and effective.
Yeah. I was on Paxil 14.
God bless you.
Yeah, I'm amazed that I'm alive.
Yeah.
I'm amazed that I'm alive with all the medicine that I've been given from a psychiatric perspective.
It's been a rodeo.
Well, Derek, I think that, this is not the job that anybody wanted to stand up and do, but, I think that the universe called the right man. You're here, you're in the arena, you're doing the work, you're pulling forward all the data, you're having the tough conversations in the midst of your own medical circumstances. And, I want to say that, my friend, is why you're an esteemed member of this team, because you're got to get it done, and a fuck it all mentality. We're going to the end, and we need more of that in this country. We need more people to stand up and say, you know what, this is hard, and it's going to cause a lot of problems, but it's necessary, and it has to be done.
This is just about doing the right thing, and again, going back to this conversation should not have come out of a nonprofit spinoff of a t-shirt brand. There's these national veteran that makes dick jokes, that prides itself on dick jokes.
Right.
That this should have come out of all these national nonprofits, all these research groups, think tanks that have been operating for 20 years. We need to look at that.
Yeah.
Why was that a point of failure?
Yeah.
When they were receiving all this money.
Yeah. Thank God for the VFW taking their position on this with their legislative directives.
Absolutely.
Thank God for them taking a chance on us to be a voice and to continue to make this a 4-alarm fire heard in our country, most especially in our government. And I thank you, and I thank everybody on our team that's willing just to continue to go down this road, because it isn't easy. There's a lot of people that are trying to destroy this work because it is exposing their facade and and potentially ripping down their wealth. I think it's very clear where the Grunt Style Foundation is going in the future, and that's we have a very clear enemy, the APA, and we are going to come after you, and we're going to dismember you from the things that we find important within our community, and that is your attachments to the Veteran Healthcare Administration. Is that fair?
I think that's pretty fair. Let's get the AP out of our VA.
There you go. Sounds like a plan.
AP out of our VA. I think that's our mantra.
And I don't know anybody crazy enough of a bunch of people like us that are willing to do that.
I think I know a few people.
But Derek, you've been, again, an esteemed member of our team, to the Grunt Style Foundation, to the Grunt Style brand. You're repping the No More Dead Friends t-shirt, hashtag No More Dead Friends t-shirt. You can find that at gruntstyle.com, where a portion of those sales goes back to the Grunt Style Foundation and its work to reduce veteran suicide. Derek, what do you want to leave everybody with before we get out of here?
Call your members of Congress. Call every member of Congress and every state representative, senator that you can, and call for reform. Call for the passage of written consent in Congress. Call for investigations into the overprescribing of veterans nationwide. Call for retraining of our entire mental health workforce, and call for better. And it's not just calling for better for our veteran community and those who have served our nation are serving our nation. This is about calling for better for all Americans, because we deserve better than what we've gotten. And I believe that all of us are here today because we do have the hope that we can do better. And so that would be what I'd like to leave us on.
Fantastic. Derek, I don't think I have much to add to that. I think that's a great ending. So with that being said, my friends, that is another episode of American Grit. This one featuring our 2025 featured veteran, Derek Blumke. So until the next one and our next program, you know what to do. Be kind to one another. Reach out to your senator and your representatives. Send all the mail that you can to the VA. Let Doug Collins know that he has work to do and he's, almost a year into his job. That would bring over 6,000 suicides under his belt that has not been addressed one time this year. So let's get it done.